and welcome to the 101st episode of the Stateside Soccer Show. My name is Jordan Wigan, and with me is a man who feels very screwed right now on the prospects of the show right now, Logan Stump.
Yeah, so what people won't
Is that
realize,
the correct translation, Logan?
I can't say the correct translation on this show. Somebody might be able to translate it over on Twitter, but they couldn't really do it there either. So you could tell that the people that translate it, and for those that don't know what we're talking about, Miguel Angel Ramirez, coach of Charlotte FC. I about threw Cincinnati in there because we're getting ready to record that too. But Charlotte FC's coach spoke today for 45 minutes with the media, Jordan. And this was the day after we recorded with Alex. Because she was going out to training this morning, and it's wild because he was talking about how honest he wanted to be, and he was almost too honest because Darwin Machis, I don't know how to say the last name, was a DP that had been rumored to come over. I think he's in Spain currently, but he was rumored to come over from Europe. It was a big deal. They were making a big deal out of it. Some people were even speculating that he was at the Charlotte Hornet game, which would be interesting if he was over here in the United States. But today it came down. I think Tom Bogert broke it where because of legal issues that he's currently dealing with in wherever he is. I think it's in Europe somewhere. Wherever he is currently, he is dealing with some legal issues, and he will not be he won't be signing with Charlotte FC this season. So it's yeah. But the coach came on, Miguel came on and said that basically, we're still trying to complete this roster, but if you're looking this team right now, we're screwed, is basically what he said. So not ideal, Jordan, because I mean the rest of this preview is going to go great because it was a lot of fun talking with Alex, and I know you're getting to listen to it as you get to edit and produce it, but she was high on a lot of the players. I felt pretty good coming out of it. This made me feel like there's a little bit more blood in the water than there needs to be right now, and so I guess we'll get into that after the preview because I'll talk to you about kind of the stuff that she said and kind of sum that up in our concluding comments. But yeah, this was fun to record, and it's kind of fun to kind of talk about how much they're screwed.
Yeah, I think you saying that this is not ideal to be hearing is kind of really underselling it. I've never seen in my life an MLS coach say that we are screwed roster-wise because of a signing falling through. This is where the Charlotte model falls apart for me. And what I mean by that is trying to get all these international roster spots to go get signings instead of building a solid block here. You know who they had? Do you remember who they had? They had Tajiri Shradi.
Right.
In the expansion draft that they went ahead and flipped. You could have had at least a goal scorer on, that's not going to take up an international roster spot in case of something were to fall through. Now the coach feels like they're screwed. Not the best start to life in Charlotte FC, and let's not forget this comes a day after Walker Zimmerman said that Charlotte created no chances in their scrimmage against Nashville, and that they barely ever had control of the ball that was not in their own half. I mean that's pretty damning, I would say. And I don't know. Does the coach saying this cause tensions with the front office? I mean, we've already had some turnover there too. I don't know. I feel very worried. I feel very worried for Charlotte FC. And you only get one first impression as a new market in this league and to gain fans. Remember, Orlando had a very good first season. I felt like really made an impact in the team as a good first impression. And then they kind of fell off a bit, and it's taken them a bit to kind of reclaim that fan base. If Charlotte doesn't start off strong, yes, they have tons of season ticket holders. What happens if they suck? Do they stick with it? I don't know. What's Panthers' attendance? Because they suck. I mean, I don't know.
It's not good.
Right. So I don't know. I'm kind of look, you get one shot to have a good first season, and we'll talk about the expectations for Charlotte on the other side of this interview. Now, I was not present for this interview, so I do want to thank Logan for jumping in and handling it himself. He felt probably really screwed when I texted him that I wasn't going to be able to make it. So thank you for not sharing that on Twitter, though.
Yeah, I was a little nervous, to be honest with you, the whole episode. But yeah, it's hard covering an expansion team just because, and we talk about this in the interview, just like we talked with Moon Tower, the fact that you're for so long covering just like weird stuff, like fan stuff, like crest and kits and random like signs that are put up, and it's just so
all the
random.
International roster spot tricks.
Yeah, and we talked about that too. So I'm excited for everybody to hear this interview because Alex is fantastic in what she does, and she's currently covering NASCAR and MLS. So she said she knew NASCAR, she's known NASCAR, she's done NASCAR. Now she had to learn MLS, and she said everybody in this market, because they didn't really have that professional soccer team that was covered heavily, they had to rely on this. I think Charlotte Independence was their last like USL club that actually had some kind of prominence in Charlotte. So
yeah, my dad has a independent shirt. I bought him.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting. So I guess we can get an interview and then we can discuss and kind of break down what she said afterward, and I can give you the rundown.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take a break. We'll introduce Alex, and then we will see everybody on the other side. All
right, when we are back from our break, and joining me on loan from the Charlotte Observer is Alex Andrejev. Alex, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. It's interesting because we covered Austin FC when they were joining the league last year, and with all these new expansion clubs coming into the MLS, it's kind of fun to just kind of see, I guess, the grassroots and everything that's been growing, and they've seen soccer at a certain level in Charlotte, and they've been used to watching at least some kind of professional soccer, whether it be semi-professional or some of the youth academies that have been playing around in Charlotte. But it's always fun to kind of see your guys' perspective on just the ground level and everything that's happening behind the scenes. It's like the rehearsal before the big day, and that's kind of what it's felt like following you. And I know you've done great coverage of that. But can you kind of just tell people where they can find your work, and then maybe some other stuff that you cover? I know you cover a wide range of things.
Yeah, totally. So I'm a reporter for the Charlotte Observer newspaper, and we've been covering this team kind of since the start of it in MLS at least, and we've had other writers cover soccer in Charlotte for a really long time. But actually, I came into this role originally as a NASCAR reporter, and that's what sort of my main beat and what I was hired to do. But I was just telling you, Logan, I was essentially hired on the same day that the expansion bid announcement was happening for a Major League Soccer team in Charlotte. So I've also picked up coverage of this new MLS team coming to Charlotte FC, and really seen the rollout of that team since its beginning here. So yeah, I'm covering both stuff right now. Really excited for this to finally kick off and to actually get to watch some soccer and watch this team play after so long. Right. But because that was December 2019 when that happened, and then the inaugural season was delayed a year amid the pandemic. So we're getting close. We're getting super close to that first kick. And yeah, we'll be covering the team. We have been covering the team. And just how it's growing and developing. So you can find all my work, soccer, if you're curious about NASCAR too, right, at charlotteobserver.com/sports. And you can hit my byline or find me on Twitter as well. It's at Andrejev Alex.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm from Charleston, South Carolina, so not too far. No, and I currently reside in Orlando. I didn't even tell you that, but knowing Charlotte, I've been to Charlotte multiple times, and just I love the city. My best friend actually lives there, and the city's beautiful. It's perfect real estate for sports teams. Like I used to love going to what were the Bobcat games, and then all of a sudden the Hornets came back and they changed their name, and then going to a couple of Panthers games, watching the Tar Heels and Duke. Like that's always been something that has kind of been ingrained because South Carolina never had the sports team, so they always just kind of looked to the north, and up north in Charlotte, that's where people got their fix. So I think this is perfect for not only North Carolina, but South Carolina too. I think that this gives that region where it's kind of been lacking in that region as far as a professional soccer team. I think it does pretty well in doing that. So I know fans are looking forward to your coverage of it. I know they're learning just as much as probably we are as covering the league. And trust us. I mean, I know I'm speaking for myself, but maybe you too, that we're learning those weird salary cap. We talked pre-show about the salary caps and the different rules that they have and the allocation money. But I hope that people can find your work, because I've really enjoyed kind of following along vicariously through you and how this has all gotten started. But that just leads me into my first question. I want to ask you, when did you said that they got it back in December of 2019, right? The bid. Was it, I mean, had they always wanted to kind of see professional soccer make it in Charlotte? And then, how long had this been going before the bid was actually made?
Yeah, no, I think, I mean, I would be remiss to say that this is like the first time that soccer is coming to Charlotte, because that's certainly not the case. And I'd argue even that like Charlotte has a pretty long history of hosting like minor league soccer teams, to put it that way. And the expansion bid happened more recently, but I can give like a little bit of context for just kind of Charlotte soccer history. Even though, some of this was like well before even I was born, but I know the Observer has done some, long time coverage of like just what the soccer landscape looked like, and then how this latest bid came to be to sort of get MLS here. The first professional team was in the 1980s with the Carolina Lightning. And so that was a team that played in the American Soccer League, which was below the North American Soccer League. So that was all like pre-MLS stuff. And then the Charlotte Eagles came, that was early 1990s, I believe. And then Charlotte Independence came, purchased the franchise rights for the Eagles to play in USL Pro. And then those teams have since moved around like the USL landscape. At one point, the Independents were looking at potentially trying to turn that into an MLS franchise. There was a bid in late 2016 and then throughout 2017, pushed by Marcus Smith, who is the president of Speedway Motorsports, which operates a bunch of NASCAR racetracks like Charlotte Motor Speedway. For an MLS team, and try to bring that to Charlotte. And then that ultimately didn't come to fruition. There wasn't really like full buy-in from the city and county at that point. And then once David Tepper comes in, buys the Carolina Panthers in 2018. And I think from that point on, it was, I think he was pretty clear about wanting to try to bring an MLS team to Charlotte as well. And so with that organization, coming in, having essentially control at Bank of America Stadium, where Charlotte FC will be playing, and then working pretty closely with the city and county to make that bid possible. That's really when those discussions started picking up, was 2018, 2019, and then officially landing it in December 2019.
It's always interesting too, because they and just that whole process that you just explained, just watching the Sacramento team fall apart and their expansion bid and everything going on there, and St. Louis currently trying to do the same thing that Charlotte did. Yeah. And Charlotte was pushed back a year, right? They were supposed to come into the league last season, but because of the pandemic, it didn't quite pan out that way.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was supposed to be 21, and then over this, just that COVID era, essentially, with, I think it was more so like the league's call and just wanting to launch this team, being able to have full capacity seating and that sort of thing. So that's why it was essentially pushed back a year. So now 2022 is the official, season, inaugural season.
So looking at the city, is there a lot of excitement building up around? Because it does seem like every time we've covered an expansion team, or talked about expansion teams, and even so, 5 years down the road, when you're talking FC Cincinnati, when we still talk to them, they still feel like a young club. Is there a lot of excitement? Like, do you feel in the area that there's a buzz in the city just about this team? And the buzz pun was not intended by any chance.
Yeah, Buzz City. No, right. I mean, there is, and it's picked up. The closer we get to them actually playing in that first match, it's definitely picked up. I feel like I was doing a lot of stories just early on where they have these signings, but it's so far off that you couldn't really get the feeling of that excitement. But now that we're closer, the Charlotte FC, I guess now former Charlotte FC president, now
right.
CEO, but Nick Kelly, who worked very closely with this team, was the kind of first president and leading a bunch of the ticket sales ahead of launch. He talked to reporters last week and was just giving us an update on ticket sales figures. The team's been really adamant about trying to drive a high number of ticket sales with this launch. They want to break an MLS league record with around 74,000 and try to sell out that first home match. Have said they want to average 30,000 for the rest of the season for home matches. So that's big for MLS, but it's also big for just Charlotte sports too. I think the fact that there is no Major League Baseball team competing for attention. We've got the Panthers and Hornets is really the pro men's franchises here, and Charlotte FC kind of filling in as that next big one in MLS. Just looking at those attendance figures and goals, I think pre-COVID Panthers were averaging around 72,000 fans for home games. The Hornets were averaging, I want to say 17,000 fans per game in early January was a stat I saw. So that places Charlotte FC if they can hit this record and then still average around 30,000 fans, that's a big deal for Charlotte sports scene for sure.
And I know when the Panthers were good, that fan base there in Charlotte is intense, and they've got a good fan base. I think they've got a city that does. It seems to be a younger city from what I can remember. It does draw a lot of the younger crowd, and I know Nashville has had major success with that as well because they're a big flock of young people going to and want a professional team, and a lot of people not even watching soccer before. So I was just kind of interested on that aspect. And you talked about Nick Kelly and the 60,000 sold tickets for that opening match. I did want to ask you about, and it was kind of in the notes, but not really. There was a lot of backlash from the outside in how that pay scale worked. The tickets were more expensive than a lot of other clubs that offer soccer-specific stadiums. Was that mostly from just the outside? Were there a lot of fans that were maybe not so happy about the fact that the ticket pricing had been kind of high for a team that's just coming into the league?
Yeah, no, you're right. That definitely was a big story when the season ticket prices were first rolled out. They were the most expensive in the league for the season ticket package. Essentially, what the league, or I guess what the team has since done, is sort of rolled out these single match day tickets that people can buy, which are much more reasonable and very comparable to what other match day tickets look like for as low as $15. You can get season tickets now, so they've made affordable options for people, I think, in response to some of that. But I think people have also, you've seen people are still willing to pay for the tickets too.
Yeah, right.
So they haven't necessarily changed that pricing structure. I think they've just opened it up by making those single match tickets a little bit more affordable. They're going to offer walk-up tickets as well for some of that, with kind of certain rules around when and how you can get that. It's going to be kind of first come, first serve with limited supply for those. But yeah, no, that definitely was a big story early on with just how it was rolled out and kind of some unclear communication about, why the prices were so high and that sort of thing. Because yeah, certainly for MLS ticketing pricing, the season tickets at least were fairly steep. Yeah,
I know it caught a lot of attention from a lot of our friends that were in Cincinnati and Nashville, and all that they were just basically tickets are typically cheaper in the Midwest than they are going to be on the East Coast, so it's kind of like that too, where you've got the cities that are wealthier cities, and Charlotte has been known for the banks and everything that go on in Charlotte with tech and stuff. That it is an up and rising city, and I think that's kind of what those prices really meant. And I know fans were upset, and from what I saw, it was mostly fans that weren't Charlotte fans, so I don't know why they cared so much, but they seemed to be more up in arms than the Charlotte fans did. The Charlotte fans, like you said, were flocking to get these tickets. And so I want to ask you about that, because the fans are what make the team. If you don't have the support, it can be brutal. I know New York City FC and the Red Bull, they've both had a really tough time at times, filling stadiums. The LA teams have been a little bit more successful, but these bigger cities tend to have a little bit harder time. Chicago has a hard time. Charlotte, not quite as big of a city, but pretty important that they get a huge fan base in behind them to start, because once you start to lose that fan base, it can turn ugly, and it starts to turn into like a Miami, or it starts to turn into some of these situations with Cincinnati. But I just want to get your thoughts on the fans, and is this team making more efforts now, to connect to the community? Are they doing things in the community that are helping, bring fans in? Is it part like, instilling some of these academy players, like bringing in all these academy players so that more people are kind of invested in this club? Or, what are the club doing outside of just providing stuff on the pitch to kind of bring fans closer?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that was probably maybe not so much like an early criticism, but it was something that I think the club wanted to certainly address fairly early on. And actually, one I guess kind of unique thing that they've done is this: they've hired a chief fan officer role,
Right.
which is thought to be this like new, position that's not really like you don't see in other clubs in the in MLS necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
where it's actually someone specifically on the company's payroll that's really that's his job. Sean McIntosh, he's the guy that was hired as this chief fan officer, who is essentially the point of contact and this like fan facing role for any of these communications that are happening between like supporters groups and the club and just the community in the club. And he's like sort of the guy that you can direct any questions and generating ideas for
Mm-hmm.
what the team can be doing to get out in the community. And I think one area, Nick was asked about this the other day too, but and I think we've just seen at certain like events that they've had, supporters events, and even just rollouts of jerseys or certain player announcements and things like that. Anything that they've done leading up to this that's been a big kind of ticketing promotional event around this club. I think they've definitely tried to make more of an effort to connect with the city's Latino community as well, and just kind of building out even just certain media coverage and trying to get Spanish-speaking media very involved, and
Mm-hmm.
covering these events has been a way that they've sort of made strides to connect a little bit more in that sense, because I think that was somewhere that fairly early on there was this sort of like disconnect between, okay, we've got supporters groups, but how can we really bring in the Latino community and connect with them if these are people that are going to be very passionate about our games and our players and our fans? Because the team does have a lot of Spanish-speaking players, Hispanic players, Latinx players on the team. So if they've got the guys, then they want to make sure that the fans are coming out and seeing them as well.
Yeah, I loved talking to the Austin FC guys, because they said the same thing. A lot of their players were Latino. They needed that influence of fans, and they have a huge Latino population, and they needed those fans in the supporter section to cheer them on and really a rally. And a lot of them had grown up watching Liga MX, and they've watched some of these South American clubs too. And they've talked a lot about just, infusing the culture in that. But it was interesting too, because it was like that was all they had to write about. And I'm sure you feel the same way, that it feels at times like when this was all happening in 2019, 2020, you just felt like, I'm going to write today about the supporters section, because I really got, the supporters section got a new lead. I don't know what to do. Like,
that's what's there.
It's like, I got to make something up. Right.
Yeah.
So I did want to ask you about David Tepper, a very rich owner. And honestly, I always felt like this was good for the league if the money is used. And to be honest, right away, it looks like Charlotte at least is going to make the effort to spend money, whether it be through all their 12 or 14 international spots that they seem to have collected somehow in some way. But I wanted to ask you just more about him and that ownership. I know, following the Panthers from a distance, there had been good seasons, but it kind of had been a disaster with their sports team and how they've operated that franchise. And, there's always concern, I think, too, because the Crafts own the Revs up in New England. There's worry that like the Wilfs owning Orlando, like it is tough for NFL owners to dip down into the soccer leagues. Is there like that feeling around the city that maybe a lot of more focus is going to be spent on the Panthers, or maybe the Panthers are going to lose focus because now he's got this other team and they're kind of playing in that same building. And it seems to be like there's expenses going every which way. And there's a lot of question marks, I think, from a lot of people on the outside. They're looking at it going, does he know how to run a soccer club? Is there that kind of sentiment, or does it feel like he's hired the people necessary underneath him to do a good job to make these investments?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think certainly from the outside, I've heard that too, especially because they are playing in Bank of America Stadium. And naturally, one question that always gets brought up is like, are they going to play in a soccer specific stadium ever? And, I've asked them, the team ownership and, just people on the front office side there, if that's ever a plan. Talk to MLS and see if that's a plan. Not heard any indication that is at this point. No matter how many times we ask, but so they seem set on Bank of America Stadium at least, and have invested a lot in renovating that to make it more soccer friendly. So I think that even just those renovations, even though Bank of America Stadium is certainly it can be used for a bunch of like multi-purpose events, concerts, other sporting events, things like that. A lot of those renovations in this latest package, it was a $50 million renovation project that was happening that with a lot of it aimed at building it out for soccer. And the turf field was another like point of concern, it seems like, as well, because soccer players hate playing on turf. But that was another thing, just of like in terms of sustainability and cost for the stadium. And I was out there actually like right after it snowed, and it seemed to, at least they were able to play on it fairly easily the next day. So I was like, okay, I could see how turf kind of works here. But I think like the investment has been there certainly in trying to bring the right people in. It seems like Zoran Krneta was the sporting director for Charlotte FC, and he was like one of the first hires that they brought in. Tom Glick, who was former Charlotte FC president and then former Tepper Sports president, who's recently left, which we haven't heard anything on really why that is at this point. But he had a really extensive soccer background prior to coming over to the Charlotte side and the Tepper Sports side, and very much I think was focused on making soccer a priority, and you can see that with Zoran as well, having this very large and expansive international scouting connections and just kind of ability to bring in some of this high level talent, and the scouting department, they've had a ton of time to really like hone in on some of these players too that I think they wanted. And I think you haven't necessarily seen like these big name signings that might make people go like, wow, Charlotte is really investing millions and millions to bring in these huge guys. But I don't think that means necessarily that it's going to it's going to not work, or they're not getting the talent in there that still is going to be able to perform in the league. I think it's just a matter of this, this scouting department that they've put together is trying to be very conscious of like, we want to get players in here that you can build a team around, you can build a franchise around, that are going to sign for multiple years. They're not just going to be here for like, 2 years and we're going to pay millions of dollars and then they're going to go leave for Europe or something again, or retire or whatever. So, I would say that just from that, it makes me hopeful that there is, I think, some real like thought and investment and attention to this team. And, they've put out all of these massive ticketing goals. So I think they want the fans to be there, and they want to build something for the fans to root for ultimately. Right.
Yeah. So and you talked about it, you alluded to it. And they did have a technical director leave for the Crew. Flick leaves. That's obviously concerning, right? For fans, it seems like that was a concern when a lot of their front office staff is leaving.
Yeah, you're referring to Mark Nichols, right?
Yeah, sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think the timing certainly has not looked good for Charlotte FC in that sense too, especially just having all of these like Tepper Sports changes at the same time. You have that happen, and then right after you've got changes just within the leadership structure of Tepper Sports, within a month out of like this first kick. So, it sounds like they've already got plans, I guess, to essentially fill in those roles and restructure. Now they've got a new president as well coming in, Joe LeBeau, who was more so on the ticketing side for the Panthers. And then with Tom Glick leaving, it'll be Nick Kelly, essentially more or less stepping into Tom Glick's role with a slightly different title. And then Joe LeBeau heading stuff on the Charlotte FC side. And we really haven't heard that much, honestly, from him, or what kind of his long-term plans and visions are. But I've been told also that like Nick is going to be sticking around at least for, into the early part of the season, and then we'll probably maybe take more of a back seat. And then I mean, Mark certainly was like, had been with the club since fairly early on in its launch and was really trying to build out the academy team. But once Miguel, and I think it seemed like Mark wanted to leave for that opportunity, and then it was just the changes, I think, coming so close to like this first kick, at least all of this restructuring that they've sort of had on the staffing side. I mean, it's not optimal timing, certainly. Like you want to have some consistency leading into, the launch of this team that's taken so long to put together, and then not have it be a distraction, I think. And maybe that's part of just how the club is looking at this is in terms of all these leadership changes is like, it's definitely not ideal to have all of this stuff happening in the background when you want to be focused on the soccer side and how the team is performing. But, it seems like they have a plan in place of how they want to like sort of pick up at least and get through this first, match, the March 5th home opener. And then we'll probably see some changes in terms of roles and, just who's coming in, who's staying, and what those, I guess, new roles actually look like for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, it seems like the outsider perspective, it's a common thread, but it's like looking at it and going, okay, they're trying to put a team together and they don't need all these distractions. The biggest thing was when he did leave when Mark Nichols does leave and he goes to Columbus Crew team that has been, touted about the league for the last couple of years as being one of the premier clubs. And then it's like, okay, well, that's kind of confusing. But then again, I think what people hadn't realized was when they do start to make different hirings, when they bring in Miguel Angel Ramirez, they've got different, ideas and visions, and maybe those visions weren't necessarily aligned, or maybe they, come to find out I've done the work that I need to do. We're in the next phase of scouting and directing, and my job's here is done. So I think that's also something I think people wrote about and kind of questioned was maybe his part was done. Maybe it was Miguel and they just didn't have the same kind of visions, or maybe, that role is going to be laid out for him later on, as, some of these sports teams do tend to look at coaches and go, okay, you're going to be more of the sporting director and the technical director. What do you need from us? So I think that's always interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and Miguel's background too is very much so on the academy side as well. And so I'm sure he probably came in and looked at, some of his earliest comments were like, I don't feel like a lot of the academy players are ready to step into this first team role. And so it'll be interesting to see how much he gets involved in terms of just the academy development, or leaves that to kind of a separate staffing and structure as well. I mean, I imagine he'll want to be pretty involved in it just based on his background.
Right. So leading into the next question, it is about Miguel Angel Ramirez. He leads this club through this first season. Can you kind of talk to us about, his history, where he comes from, and then kind of maybe some formations or styles that he sorts of, I mean, obviously formations are a little iffy because he's only had a preseason match and then the media, they just banned from the rest of it. But It's like, can you just speak to his style and then, who he is as a person?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, well, somewhat.
Right. Right.
I'm like, oh yeah.
Of course I can. That's fine.
No, but no, he does have like a very distinct personality and coaching style. I will say though, that some of the earliest feedback that we've heard from the players has been just that he coaches almost like a professor, like he almost teaches as he coaches, has been what we've heard from a lot of the players. That are also getting to know him and working with him for the first time or even a long time. And that like this style and brand that he brings to soccer, it's expected to be very distinct and unique. He's talked a lot about wanting to bring this possession based game to the city, wants to make it very watchable and fun for fans as well. So I think that was part of the decision to hire him ultimately was, if this was a big goal for the team to try to make attendance high and get people to turn out, how are we going to bring a coach in that's going to help that mission ultimately?
Right.
So, what's going to be watchable and fun. And then it's up for debate, okay, how watchable and fun is possession,
Right.
possession-based system, sure.
Right.
But that's just how I've heard him describe his own brand of soccer too, is I think it's going to be really fun to watch. And at least what we've seen early in some of these training, and granted, there's not been a ton of access so far to, in terms of I couldn't tell you about formations yet or anything like that necessarily, but it's a lot of just super quick movement and short passes. And the players have also described it as just a different way to almost think about spacing, their own positions and spacing around the ball. Even reports that I've heard from these early closed door friendlies have been that the players' positions are very fluid, actually. So you might see guys kind of filling in different roles and positions just as you're watching them on the field. His background, just in terms of where he's come from, I mentioned the academy portion a little bit. It seems like he's coached in almost every country,
right.
But probably what he's most well recognized for was that 2019 Copa Sudamericana win with Independiente del Valle. So he has a little bit of a history of overperforming with teams, if that makes sense, doing better, maybe exceeding expectations in a way. And then most recently coached at Internacional in Brazil. We've already seen Vinicius Melo or Mayo, I guess is how you pronounce the last name. But we've seen some of those connections already kind of play out and come to fruition on the Charlotte FC side as well, from just relationships that he had at Internacional. So that, at least as far as I know, the brand of soccer is supposed to be very exciting and entertaining, and hopefully it just produces results as well on the field.
So speaking of the results on the field, I want to ask you about a couple players, and I can just kind of rattle off the list here. And just, it's always hard with these because it's okay, there's a ton of different players we could talk about, but there's ones that catch people's eyes just because of where they come from. Also, I think they made one of the best moves that they've probably made quietly, and getting Anton Walks from Atlanta United. But I'm going to just rattle off a couple of names, and then if you can just maybe give some background or maybe some things that about some of these players, just to give us a little bit of an idea as to what they're feeling out there. And I know I'll miss a couple of names here and there, but again, I don't want to have you go through a whole roster. That doesn't sounds time consuming. So the first one, I think because of where he comes from, because people know who he is, because he won a Premier League title, can you just speak a little bit to Christian Fuchs and what he brings? He's a veteran, 34 or 35, I think. What does he bring for Charlotte FC and a team that seems to be pretty young?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's probably been touted as they've certainly promoted him the most early on as one of their earlier signings. Everyone knows him from Leicester City and the Premier League. I think what he brings really is just leadership, maybe not so much MLS experience necessarily, but just having that Premier League experience is, you can't really beat that. And, that leadership quality, you certainly see, I watched some of the games too when he was playing on the Independence on loan here, which was almost it was kind of cool to see him after he got this Premier League winner after playing with the USL team. And I did a story on that because it was him, Adam Marmore and Brant Bronico that were all on that team together, playing on loan. And but you can certainly see that, and all the guys on the Independence were talking about you just, he is we follow his lead very much so in terms of just what he's doing in drills and how he's warming up and how he's showing up to practice and, what he's doing beforehand. One of the great quote, I think, was he was oh man, I did it. I was just asking him, what's it been like when you first came in here? And what are some examples of just the differences? And he's well, I remember doing a slide tackle pretty early on and a training, and everyone's looking at me why are you doing a slide tackle? But that's just how he plays, right? So I think it very much so elevates the people around him with the experience he has. So that's what I sort of foresee him bringing to the Charlotte FC team as well.
I'm sure the USL guys are looking over, going, "We got to play that." I don't want to do that. This is like fun. This guy's like a man child. I don't want to play. So Anton Walks, we alluded to him. Jordan and I, we covered the expansion draft, and it was a little anticlimactic, but it was done, but it was cool because they did use the expansion draft kind of different. I mean, it was, a lot of just selling players for more money and allocation money. They wanted to collect more assets, I think. But I think the one pick that they really did make and kept and are going to be successful with is Anton Walks, because we just got done with our Atlanta United preview, and we talked with Chris Smith, who covers MLS and the Atlanta United, and he said that that's a huge loss for Atlanta United. They didn't have room for him because of Miles Robinson, and you got guys like that, like Alan Franco, who are just kind of blocking him. You got Anton Walks, who is probably going to become one of the better center backs in this league. Can you kind of just speak to maybe some of his skills? And I know he had a rough time because, he found out that he's going to Charlotte because Atlanta's decided, you know what, he'll be fine. We're not going to protect him. We have to let him go. Charlotte were like vultures and took him, and it was brilliant, I think.
Yeah. I mean, right, like first pick in the expansion draft too, and as you mentioned, that center back. I also, I know he's played a little bit of right back too, so I will be actually very curious to see how he fits into Miguel's system, and just whether they play him more in this like center back role or kind of have him flex to that right back position where it seems like they might, be lacking a little bit, just in terms of roster. So yeah, no, I think certainly you saw the success that he's had in MLS, and I think that's what he also brings to the Charlotte FC team, is just a team that has been so international heavy. I mean, granted, he was technically international as well,
right?
Being from England, but he has the MLS experience that I think Charlotte FC was getting a little bit of criticism for, of like, is this team going to be good? And there's so many international players that don't have MLS experience. So I think that's what, he's had proven success in the league and really kind of holding down that back line. So I expect that, he'll very much be kind of a key player for Charlotte as well.
Jordi Alcivar is a young designated player, so they're using that 22 initiative. Is he expected to come in and be in one of these starting roles? Is this more one of those signings that like they sign him, he becomes a project, and they, sparingly he'll start and kind of work his way into the 11?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of foresee him as a starting player, honestly, or at least it seems like they're gonna test him out that way. But yeah, I mean, like Ecuadorian player, 22, on the younger side. I don't know why, like he like kind of seems older to me, but yeah, central midfielder. And the like young designated player kind of title, it seems to me would allocate that like they've spent a significant amount of money on him and they want him to be, again, like one of these franchise players potentially. So whether he plays kind of like that box midfielder role or whether and how many minutes he's getting, I think kind of is like a question, something that I'm still sort of trying to figure out, like how he fits into this whole thing. But I certainly see him as like one of their kind of key starters right now, or at least, being a regular like halftime substitution or something like that.
Is there concern about Vinicius Melo? I mean, I saw that he was going to miss the preseason. Is there concern with the injury, or is this just more of like precautionary?
Before I was honestly told earlier that like he was good to go in terms of injury stuff, and that's what I had been hearing kind of coming out of the Brazilian, and even just like reports from the Brazilian side was that it's going to be a shorter injury. So I don't think it's good necessarily that it's taking this long for that like full recovery to happen, and the fact that it's going to be like the expectation is that he's going to be out for preseason at least, and then potentially into the start of the season. And that I think that's more so concerning just because they can't really afford to not have the forwards and strikers and wingers be out right now necessarily. I mean, they can, it's early, but I think that's where the roster you're seeing is like needing those positions to be filled the most. And so to not have Vinicius as an option in training with the team right now, I mean, that's not ideal, I don't think.
Right. Goalkeeper, it seems like they've got strange option. Like they're not. I wouldn't say right now I'm looking at on a paper and going, okay, that's the starter. It looks like it's going to be much more of like here, battle for this starting position. We'll see which one's the best. Or is that seemingly going to be it, or are they going to rely on one of these, veteran keepers that does have MLS experience?
Yeah, no, I mean, I almost, when I was just like kind of looking at their moves and stuff, I was thinking that it would be Christian. I don't know if I'm like pronouncing it in the Croatian way, but yeah. So Christian Kalina was Christian Kalina was kind of the guy that I was looking at, is like he's the international player, and they're bringing him over, from. It looked to me just like, okay, this is going to be most likely their starter. And then because they filled in some of those other roles with like Adrian Zendejas on the USL side as like a free agent, I think that more so was a move because what Miguel was saying, like they didn't have necessarily the academy players to potentially fill in, which is why they're having 4 right now on their roster. And then you've got, Pablo Cisniega, who's another guy with MLS experience coming from LAFC, and George Marks was their from Clemson, is their 4th, brought in during the Super Draft. So it seems like they've got kind of this goalkeeper heavy roster, and at least my understanding is that like in the system that Miguel wants to run, it's a very, again, particular kind of goalkeeper that they need. To play this way. It's someone who's going to be able to, throw the ball up as far up as the field as possible, and super tall, and can get it there, is what I was noticing. I'm like, man, throw a tall guy, maybe George. Then, but yeah, I mean, and Christian came a little bit later on. Like he wasn't here for some of those early training days too, so I didn't really get to see him too much. Usually the goalkeepers would be out slightly earlier than the others for those starts of training. And, Christian was starting at least this like latest friendly that they played against Nashville. He was their starter and they lost to Nashville ultimately. So it'll be interesting once they have some more games coming up in Charleston, who we're seeing, I think, in that role as the starting goalkeeper. So yeah, I mean, that's a position again. They've got 4, and it might be just, you're seeing them switch guys in and out and give everyone a little bit of time to determine who is that starter.
So 2 more players. One was really interesting because I think the kid's going to be really good, and he's one of those super draft picks that I think, I mean, looking at the skill, looking at what has been written, this seems to be one of those kids that a lot of people think have a chance to make it in this league, and then possibly throw his name as he gets older into the U.S. men's national team considerations. And that's Ben Bender, 20-year-old or 21-year-old that came out of Maryland. Can you kind of just speak to some of his talent? Adidas, or Generation Adidas player. So he's one of those top college or collegiate players that is coming out this year. Do you see a role for him, or is this going to be more of those sparingly? I know a lot of these guys come out, you play 10 matches, maybe 12 matches, depending. Or do you see this more of like him having a more prominent role because this is an expansion side?
Yeah, I mean, I just based on, I guess, like the playing time that we've seen kind of early and stuff, my initial thought was like, no, he wouldn't be, and he's like super draft, and he's going to wind up on supplemental roster, and not really, but like he's already scored a goal in one of their friendlies against the Grenada's men's national team, and earned some playing time and stuff. Describes himself as this like box to box midfielder who really likes this the system that Miguel is playing in, and that he's playing in for Miguel. Like, he's talked a lot about feeling like he fits into this system well. And so I think for that reason, like you might see him come and make more of an impact earlier than might be expected for someone that was picked up in a super draft, I guess. Like he was first pick. But again, I think even just seeing that, I'm like, yeah, but how many of these guys like start off right away on that first team and senior roster? But again, like if he does continue to have a really, really strong, preseason, then sure, why not? There could certainly be a role for an expansion team for him.
Last one, and this one was, I think this is a big side. Like usually a lot of and we saw it last year with Austin when we covered Austin, they could not and still have not found a number 9 that is consistent enough to play game in and game out. It seems like they're still trying to see if they can find different options. It seems like Charlotte actually did a really nice job of putting allocating their time and finding that correct player for his system. And I think that's what a lot of teams struggle with. I think Cincinnati has that issue where they just went out and bought a striker because he's shiny. This seems more of like a perfect fit. I was reading a lot about him. I was watching a lot of his film. He's perfect, it looks like, for this kind of possession ball that Ramirez wants to play, because I think he can carry a ball really well. He's really comfortable outside of the box, which you don't see a whole lot with the number 9, and he's dangerous inside the box. And he scores goals. Like he can score goals. He's like 35 goals in his professional career as he comes over. Can you just speak to how important he is as a DP signing, one of the club's biggest one, and then kind of what you expect from him?
Yeah, I mean, no, certainly the club has been touting him. I think the way that I've described it to others too, and maybe some that don't know like soccer as well necessarily know it's a soccer show, but yeah, he certainly seems like kind of this franchise player for Charlotte, right? It's a 4-year contract with an option year for Karol Swiderski. I don't think we mentioned his name. Yeah, we didn't mention his name. Yeah, Karol Swiderski. Yeah, Polish striker, first DP. With his contract was worth around $5 million, so that's the most so far like that Charlotte has spent. There might be more coming, but that I think certainly you've seen the impact that he's had for on the Poland side with the national team there, and then PAOK was like the Greek club that he signed over from, and I think just the speed and kind of ability to make some really impressive goals. Like even just watching him is fun to watch. Just some of the balls that he's been able to play and still find the back of the net has been, I think, I think I consider that a pretty good, strong signing for Charlotte, even though, there might be fans here that are like, I have no idea who the heck this person is. But again, like the team thinks, that they got a guy that almost was like, wow, the caliber and level that he's played at. I know just like Zoran was talking about it, and he's like, I feel like we got someone that, people were looking at just in the international market, like how did this expansion team land him?
Right.
Because he's going to be really good. If not, he already is good, but like he's going to continue to get better and expected to make an impact in this league. So whether that happens, I don't want to like put expectations too high, but that's kind of the word about Karol is that, yeah, this is a good signing for them.
And that's the toughest part, I think, too. Like what you said, you can't guarantee success for especially number 9s, because number 9s can be very successful in different leagues, and you're going, man, they tore this league up, or they tore that league up, or they tore, but then they get here and it's a totally different league. And I think guys come over here from Europe, from South America, and they think, well, it's just MLS. And it used to be that way. It was just MLS. Now it's more of like, this is a physical, young, getting better league, and it's improving. And you're seeing the quality of talent improve. The defenses are improving. I think it's hard for strikers and number 9s to find goals. And I know my co-host is a big Union fan, and he'll listen back to this and probably yell at the audio. But I always look at Kasper Schmeichel and said, while he does facilitate well, he was never that guy. Like he just never really panned out. They shipped him off to Chicago. This didn't feel that way. This felt much more like this fits the system. This is kind of what he is all about. And, this Polish striker could very well fit in here with the system.
Yeah. And I think that's why they, the scouting staff and coaching staff talk so much about, building out the spine of the team first was the thing I kept hearing, was like really building back that defensive line, getting all their midfielders in before focusing on some of these strikers and wingers. And so this again was a signing that I look as a very kind of specific move, as like this, this is going to fit in well, and this is what we're looking for and the type of quality that he brings. So, you hope it pays off and pans out. But again, it's early. We'll see. They get hurt, and then it's like, okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, then it's all out the window. You got to start from scratch. So if my co-host was here, he'd say he wants to ask you this question. He always gets to ask this question, but I get to do it today because he's a bum and doesn't show up. But your expectations for Charlotte FC, and I'm not going to ask you to predict playoff spots or anything crazy, but I just want to ask you, what do you think would be a good season if you're looking back on it? What would be a good season when we get through 2022 or head into 2023? If you're looking back at the season, what makes a good season for Charlotte FC? What do they need to do to make that the case here as they begin their first year?
Yeah, I mean, well, the club has already kind of set some pretty high expectations for themselves, I would say, and so now it's almost a matter of like trying to live up to those a little bit. You know, the club came out pretty early and said like we want to make playoffs in the first year, and not just make playoffs, but host a playoff game. So that's like, you know, top 3, top 4 in the conference. So I think that would be, you know, sort of meeting their own expectations, and maybe that's a good place to start. But for an expansion team, again, like, you know, I think making playoffs is big. You know, meeting some of these attendance figures, I think that would be a win for this team in general. Is just, you know, the 74,000 is all like well and good and stuff, but I think it'll be more so how many people are going to continue to show up for matches throughout the season. It's a long season. You know, they can make playoffs, that'll be huge, but are they going to put something on that fans are going to want to consistently come out for and hit that 30,000 average attendance goal for home matches would be big. And then I think just making, you know, maybe not necessarily hosting playoff match, but I mean, making playoffs would be, I think, maybe not an expectation, but
right.
But they've said it's an expectation, so I guess I will also go with that like if the club thinks they can do it. And then just looking at some of the guys they've brought in, again, we'll have to see kind of how the season progresses. But you know, playoffs would be big, and they've had a lot of time to put this team together and have talked so much about how particular they're being with some of these signings. So I think, you know, get a couple more wingers or strikers, and then, you know, maybe we'll see about playoffs.
Yeah, I think for Charlotte fans listening, it's tough. Like, it is a tough league, but if you look at Nashville, they're like the blueprint for success. If you look at FC Cincinnati, that's what you don't want to be. If you really want to look at it, you don't want to be Inter Miami, because you don't want to be bad and breaking rules. It's just, like, as a Charlotte fan, I do think you guys are, at least Charlotte is on a path for better success than some of these other clubs. I think they've got a vision and where they want to go. And I think they've got the coach and the direction. I think it'll be just a matter of now, like you said, is it a couple more wingers? Is it a couple more of these attacking players that they can get in to help? Because I do think their defense is actually pretty solid, finding a goalkeeper too. But I think that you make some really good, interesting points. And I've enjoyed my time talking to you, Alex. And so if you will, one more time, just kind of plug where people can find your stuff, and then we'll let you out of here.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me on. You can find all my stuff at charlotteobserver.com/sports. I'm on Twitter at Andrejev Alex.
And we are back from our interview. What a great interview, Logan.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Jordan. And I know you probably will never listen to it, but
I do have a flight. I do have a flight coming up too. I guess I could listen to it on there.
That's true. You could definitely do that, Jordan. Catch up on all things Charlotte FC.
Catch up on all things Charlotte FC. Make sure I make a good prediction in the prediction show with it. So let's talk about what Alex said.
Okay.
We always talk about what predictions, and not predictions, but I guess what is the successful season. You know, she said the club continues to say what a top 4 spot,
right? A home
playoff game. That's not happening. When your coach comes out and says we're screwed, I don't think it's going to help push them to where they need to be. And also, let's think about what that sets for the rest of the team in the locker room. You know, are they going to buy into it when their coach is already kind of writing off the position that they're in? I do think that they could win something, and I think that thing is the wooden spoon, unfortunately. But look, that's Cincinnati's, right? So we'll have to see if Charlotte can wrestle it away from them, right? Can Charlotte wrestle the wooden spoon and kind of become on top, or I guess on bottom of that situation? she says, the bigger thing is making that impact with the fans and ticket sales and all that kind of stuff. And that's what I was alluding to at the beginning of the show. You get one chance to really nail it. And if they come out and look, I'd say good thing that that this is an MLS team. And what I mean by that is I don't know how much play that we're screwed is going to get on headlines on Charlotte newspapers or anything. But imagine an NFL coach had said that. That would be everywhere. That'd be on USA Today. That'd be New York Times. This will fly a little bit more under the radar that casual fans may not know. So the casual fans might still show up and try to have a good time. But I do wonder what sort of mood this sets for, and this is something we couldn't even ask her because this was afterward, but what kind of mood this sets for the fans that, she mentions, hey, this is a successful season is getting the fans on board, having good attendance, which by all inclination seems to be where they're going. But when your coach comes out and says we're screwed, and does that make some fans say, well, maybe I shouldn't go to the first game. Maybe I should wait until they figure this out, because we're just 2 weeks away from the season kicking off, that there is no way that this is going to work out quickly. So, because imagine this way too, they thought they had this guy. So at that point, they're probably not communicating with any other DP strikers. So now they have to scramble. And, I don't know. I think a top 4 spot is very unlikely for them. I get it. Nashville's gone from the East, but Charlotte has not shown me anything in their roster build that makes me think that this is something that's going to happen. Now, we've been surprised before. I never thought Nashville would be as good as they are, but I don't know. There's some real questions on the roster and trading for all the international roster spots that they'll probably have to trade for again, or at least ship out some of the players if they can't get the roster spots. You're putting yourself in a huge hole if you're relying on trying to get international roster spots, because if you can't get one, then okay, that player's not able to come in now. Whatever do we even know what really caused this to fall through? I haven't really been able to see anything because this all kind of happened while I was driving home from work.
Yeah, so it was the legal issues they had. I want to say it's, again, I think it's more of like this abuse stuff. That's what it kind of sounded like. It just said legal
for him,
issues.
Like he had abused somebody and that fell through.
Something he has done has gone against the law, and he has to deal with something with the law. That's what basically I had read, that he had that there's no chance he's coming over because he's gotten into trouble before wherever he's been.
So maybe he can't get like a visa, or
that's
team
what I was thinking.
Dropped it, or
yeah. That's what I was thinking. Like, because when you say that, it almost makes it sound like, again, you can't get a green card if you've come over here and you've got issues. I mean, they've had players in the past that can't get over here. But yeah, it says ongoing legal issues in Spain regarding Machis that is unresolved. And another thing that's concerning about this, Jordan, is the fact that this kid is a striker. I had not realized he was a striker until you just said it. So they were going 4-4-2 probably, or at least some kind of diamond and, having 2 strikers or whatever it might be, kind of like a Philly situation. They don't have another proven goal scorer on their roster. Like if you look at their roster, they've got 1 striker, and that's Karol Sidarsky, who we talked about. Karol Sidarsky is it. Like, he is the forward. Vinicius Melo's been hurt, and he's a young kid that they are kind of trying to get into that situation. But that he was I'm guessing this Machis, if he's a DP, he was a starting striker along with their other DP starting striker.
So, that's the problem. Yikes. And you also have Angel Ramirez. What he also says was about making the playoffs difficult, very difficult. So if the club kept setting, we want a home playoff game, and now even making the playoffs is difficult, very difficult, when half of the conference makes it into the playoffs. I don't know. Do you see him lasting this season? I feel like the club has totally different ambitions than what the coach does, because I think the coach feels the way we do, that this roster is not set up to win, but that ownership thinks It is. I don't know if they're that far off the page. So okay, it's either that the ownership is very naive and think that they can just make it into the playoffs and don't understand the sport, which I wouldn't put past them. Then you have the other side of that, they know it's going to be rough, but they still set that goal just to talk it up to their fans to try to get them in, which I also wouldn't put past them. To me, right now, this would be the equivalent if the Baltimore Orioles said their goal this year is the World Series. I mean, because that is as likely to happen as Charlotte is to get a home playoff game. Because at that point, is it, again, you're trying to get the fans into the stand because you're saying that? Or are you saying that because you actually believe it? And if you actually believe it and the coach doesn't do it, does that mean you have to fire him? Like, that's the thing. What is their actual goal here? Because I think if I was to buy a team and come in, I'd say, look, we're going to try to win every game we can. But realistically, our goal is to have a good foundation for the future. And I think most fans would be totally okay with that because they're like, okay, it's the first year. Sure. They're not all going to be the Las Vegas Knights that made like a Stanley Cup Finals appearance in their first season, or a Chicago Fire that won it in '98 in their first year, because that's a whole old MLS style at that point. But I think now it's like, will the fans feel, okay, well, you promised us this and didn't deliver, so now we can't believe you on any other thing you say? Or do they say, okay, you were saying that just to kind of get us in here, but it seems like you can't fulfill that? Like, that's how I would look at it as a fan. You know, again, if my example, if the Orioles were to say their goal is to win the World Series, and I show up to every game and they lose 100 games on the season, I say, okay, you kind of sold us on something that wasn't there yet. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of what Charlotte response might be. If like Alex said, that they keep kind of banging home this point of a home playoff game is their goal. But what are your thoughts on it? Do you think ownership is doing this because they actually believe that's the goal, or are they just trying to get people in?
I mean, I'm to the point where the emphasis, and Nick Kelly speaks to this too, and we talked about it. You know, on the football operations side, they lose the president of Tepper Sports and Entertainment. He leaves. They lose the technical director, who is the GM. I mean, Nick Kelly is the GM, but the technical director is the one making all the decisions that help product on the field, the academy. Jordan, they were even talking about, like, there's been things written about their academy players playing other academy teams, and that's all they've had the last couple of years to look forward to. They said they look so outmanned at times that it looks like the team's not even prepared. And then you look at this, like, this is so bad. And Drake Hills wrote about it. Taylor Twellman wrote. I'm reading through Twitter as you were kind of talking, reading the hashtags after that, and it's all the major media sources going, this is not a good look. You had 2 years to plan a roster, and now it just looks like you're scattering around trying to find whatever is left available, and you're going to end up with whatever is left and available, and that's not good, because these teams are quick to hawk in on people. You've seen moves that happen. Playoffs, yeah. Talk about the playoffs.
I saw this and I had to do it.
It's unbelievable. Like, it's unbelievable that it's gotten to this quickly. And you and I were going to raise concerns about the idea that the technical director, Mark Nichols, leaving for the Crew because the Crew are a better team and a better organization. That cannot reflect well on anything. And we talked about this. I talked about this with Alex. She said, yeah, it doesn't look good. Like, it doesn't look good that your technical director builds this thing up, and then before a ball's even kicked in training, boom, there it is. And now, Jordan, a ball was freaking kicked in training today, and the first time he has the ability to talk after a training match, he told Charlotte that they basically are screwed. Like, I don't know. I can't stop laughing about it, because I feel so bad for Charlotte fans. Like, Austin, I thought was kind of like like when they first started. And I was like, this is rough. This is like abysmal. Like, this is the worst start you could possibly have. Now, it could get better, and they do have some talent on this roster. I talked about with Alex. I think the kid that they did bring over that they actually could sign, I think that Swiderski is good. I think Ben Bender is going to be a really good player.
Oh, yeah. Baltimore native.
He's going to be great, I think. But But Christian Fuchs is a 36-year-old right back, or he's on a back line that
Logan, I actually got audio of the coach saying this. Okay.
Oh no.
In English. Are you ready?
It's over. We are screwed. It's over.
That's a Michael Scott clip right there. That is.
We turned off all the Charlotte fans probably, but I feel so bad for you guys.
I do
want
too.
this to go well.
He's a billionaire.
Right.
We have billionaires owning teams. Okay, here's the issue right now. We got billionaires in the middle of a lockout for baseball because they don't want to pay baseball players their rights because the baseball players are the ones that actually bring in the money, right? So they don't even want to share that. And then you have the billionaires that own a soccer team that just say, okay, I'm in this for an investment. They don't even care about putting a winning product. They want to get 70,000 fans in for the first game of the season.
Yeah.
Who is the draw? Christian Fuchs, who won with Leicester, 7 years ago? I don't understand what the draw would be other than just this is the hot new thing that this billionaire wants to make money off of. And when it all goes south, they're just going to sell it for actually more money than they paid for it. And then you're going to have to hope that another billionaire is going to, actually fulfill what they want to fulfill. And that's kind of the state of where we're at here. And it's either that or they're just going to keep taking the money anyway and not reinvest it because, when we tried to invest it, everything fell apart. There's such a bad foundation here that I feel sorry for the Charlotte fans because, one, they could have had a cooler name. Okay. We got Charlotte FC. People really liked Charlotte Crown,
Queen
Charlotte
City.
Town, all these great names that they had available to them. No. Okay. We're just going to go with Charlotte FC. We get a logo that I think is pretty good. I think it's a good crest. Some people
Their kits are beautiful too.
I do like the kits.
Mm-hmm.
But the identity is not just the colors, the crest, and the kits. The identity is who you have on the field. And if it is due to some sort of legal issue, shouldn't you have been figuring that out before you got them? I don't know. We have the Thiago Almeida thing where he seemed to have been in some trouble, but, Atlanta waited to pull the trigger until they got more information.
Mm-hmm.
What was Charlotte doing then? Or did this blindside them because they didn't look into it enough? We don't know, really. I don't think the full extent of that, but it really is just a really bad experience for Charlotte fans. And we do feel for you. This is, Logan kind of posted this today about anytime, not just about Charlotte, but anytime a transfer doesn't work out, whether it's after the player arrives or before the player arrives, it sucks because we all want to see this league succeed and we want to see, this is a brand new market. This is Charlotte. This is, something that people could maybe get behind. I remember when Atlanta was announced in 2015, I was like, really? Atlanta's going to care about it? And they do. Mm-hmm. They show up. They fill Mercedes-Benz stadiums more than a Falcons game.
Right.
And their ownership puts the money where the mouth is. And they won a title. Will Charlotte? We don't know yet, but it's not looking promising right now, unfortunately. And it's very hard to remove an owner from sports teams that, if this is going to be an issue, if they are going to have to rebuild not long after they built, you're going to look at it and say, what was the point? Christian Fuchs works well if you build something around him, but he's not going to be somebody that plays for another 5 years. So, you kind of, if I was building a team, I would add one of those players as more of a extra piece around my core. And I don't think they've done that. I don't think they've actually built a solid core. Ben Bender is going to be great, but we've also seen with teams like Cincinnati that do draft young players who then demand a trade, right?
Yeah.
So could he do that? I don't know. He's kind of seemed like he's been in the Charlotte system. I think his brother was with Independence or whatever. But either way, this is like really troublesome, and I really feel for everybody there. Maybe it'll go okay. I would set my expectations at Wooden Spoon, and that's probably where I'm going to put them. Spoiler alert for the preview. And if they finish even one spot above that, I say this is a successful season.
Yeah.
Because maybe not successful, but okay, above my expectation at least. I don't know what a successful season for Charlotte is now.
Mm-hmm.
I would say just missing playoffs, mid-table, getting fans in, having them buy in, but I think that's very unlikely at this point. What would you say is a successful season for Charlotte before we wrap this up?
Little to no experience as far as MLS is concerned. Harrison Awful's on their squad. Mackenzie Gaines came over from Austin FC, but he's young, so he doesn't have a whole lot of experience. Jalen Lindsay, too. He did not get a whole lot of run with SKC. Christian McCoon, or is that it? I think it's Christian. He comes over from a really bad Inter Miami, and he's, a younger person, so he doesn't have a whole lot of it goes on and on and on. I can keep saying this. Anton Walks is their best player, I believe. Their striker, it's going to take time for this striker to come in immediately and make it. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen immediately. I think it's a 2-year thing. Jordan, the other issue that I really had, you need a really good defense, and I'm not sure they have it. Everything else around Anton Walks is an aging Kristen Fuchs. They've got Jalen Lindsay, but he was not good enough for SKC to kind of break into that. When you have an older back lineman in SKC that he couldn't get through. Harrison Awful is kind of like that journeyman. So he's not one you're going to rely heavily on. And then their goalkeeping situation is a nightmare too. It's Paul Cisniega, and then two guys that one's filling a supplemental spot, and he comes Zendejas, or I think that's how you say that. And then you got Marks. So it just doesn't, and that's the young kid that they drafted. So I don't. They got a guy, Kalina, that came over in an international spot that they had high hopes on. But again, it just seems like this revolving door. Alex said that it was kind of like this. I don't know who's going to be in goal, and if it's going to be Paul Cisniega, I worry there too, because that's an aging goalkeeper that's not been one of the top keepers in MLS for quite some time. Like you said, my expectations, I'm starting them at the very bottom because all the other bottom teams got a lot better recently, because Dallas got better, Houston just got better, Austin just got better.
And we're going to talk about we're going to talk about Cincinnati next episode.
Charlotte and Cincinnati, I think, are going to have a fight. And that's too bad, because both new expansion teams. Charlotte's been around. They should be up out of where they are. But I'm afraid that this is going to go more that direction rather than the successful blueprint that, somebody like Nashville has laid out.
Nashville, Atlanta. Just look at the successful teams. They're going to be more they're going to be more like a Miami or a
Austin,
or yeah. Okay. So let's go ahead and start wrapping it up here. We have just want to thank everybody for listening to the show. Hopefully we didn't scare off too many Charlotte FC fans. We're in your corner. Let us know your thoughts. If you think that this is all going to hell, or are you on board with the vision of what the roster is? I'm really curious. I've not, I joined an expansion team, not as a player, obviously. But when I started watching MLS, I didn't have a team until the Union joined, and I started following them as an expansion team. So I kind of know what the process is of being an expansion fan. And I followed Orlando's closely when I lived in 2015 in Orlando for a bit. So I understand how it's supposed to go. And, I think I'll judge it more accurately when we actually see games and such. But if I was a Charlotte fan, I'd be really pissed right now. I wouldn't be so pissed at my coach. I think it'd be more at the situation. But who did the situation? The team, the ownership, the executives, right? So I guess we'll see. I don't know how much say the coach has. Maybe this is him pleading for some sort of signing. But you can give us a follow on Twitter at Stateside Show, Facebook.com/Stateside Show, Instagram at Stateside Show, or email us statesideShow@gmail.com. We'd love to read your responses on the air, honestly. So if you do actually have any, it may not be on the Cincinnati episode because that's coming out. That's recording right after this. But yeah, I think that could be some good catharsis. So write us some stuff. And that goes for any fan base. If you have frustrations, air it out. We like to read them on air. I think there's also a voicemail way you can do it through Anchor, but yeah. Anyway, this was the Stateside Soccer Show. I am Jordan. That was Logan. He is screwed right now. And,
no, Jordan. I think the way that you should in this one is clearly the coach gives no fooks.
Make it a shirt. We're fooked. Oh yeah, I should say that we do have shirts available for the Philadelphia Union fans of The Curtain is Open. So I have mine on its way. So I'm really looking forward to wearing that. But yeah, enjoy the rest of night driving as we play you out.